A baby's life hangs by a thread as her loyal pit bull desperately tries to warn her parents of an unseen danger. Misjudged as a threat, the dog's actions reveal something far more extraordinary. Will they realize the truth in time? A heart-stopping story of instincts, loyalty, and redemption. The suburban neighborhood of Maplewood was known for its picket fences and manicured lawns, a place where life moved at a slower, predictable pace. Daniel and Laura Reed had recently moved into one of the modest two-story homes. Eager to start their new life as a family, their daughter Sophie, just 6 weeks old, had quickly become the center of their universe. Alongside them was Rocky, a 3-year-old pit bull with a glossy brindle coat and soulful brown eyes. Daniel had adopted Rocky from a shelter years before meeting Laura, and the dog had been his steadfast companion through some of life's darkest moments. Rocky was affectionate, loyal, and surprisingly gentle for his intimidating appearance. However, Laura had never fully warned to him she loved animals, but had grown up hearing stories about pit bulls being unpredictable and aggressive. With Sophie now in the picture, Laura's unease grew into annoying fear. Every noise from the baby monitor made her tense, and she often caught Rocky sitting outside Sophie's nursery, ears perked, his body alert. One evening, as Laura rocked Sophie to sleep, she noticed faint scratches on the nursery door. Daniel, she called sharply, "Did you see these marks? I think Rocky's been scratching at the door." Daniel frowned. "I doubt it's him, Laura. He hasn't been destructive since I've had him." Still, Laura's mind raced over the next few nights. She couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. Scratches appeared more frequently, and once she thought she heard soft whimpering through the baby monitor. She brushed it off as new mom paranoia, but the unease was becoming impossible to ignore. To put her mind at ease, Laura suggested installing a camera in Sophie's room, just to monitor everything she said, though her real intent was to keep an eye on Rocky. Daniel reluctantly agreed, hoping it would settle her nerves. Days later, late at night, the couple sat side by side on the couch, their laptop open to review the footage. The screen flickered to life, showing Sophie sleeping soundly in her crib. Everything seemed normal until Rocky appeared. He paced quietly into the nursery, his head low, tail wagging slightly. He approached the crib, standing so close that his breath fogged the camera lens. "What is he doing, Laura?" whispered her voice tight with fear. Daniel frowned but said nothing. They watched as Rocky placed his front paws gently on the crib railing, peering inside. His posture wasn't threatening, but Laura's anxiety spiked. "I knew it," she said, her voice trembling. "Daniel, this is it." He could hurt her. "I can't let this continue." Daniel hesitated, torn between defending his dog and addressing Laura's growing distress. "He didn't do anything, Laura. He's just curious." Laura shot him a look. "You want to wait until he does what? If curiosity turns into something else?" The argument carried into the night, growing heated. Laura insisted Rocky had to go for Sophie's safety. Daniel, his heart heavy, reluctantly agreed to look into rehoming options. They decided to take action within the week, a decision that left both of them emotionally drained. Rocky, sensing the tension, stayed by the nursery door that night, his body curled protectively. Unbeknownst to them, the footage held a secret they hadn't yet uncovered, a revelation that would challenge everything they believed about Rocky. Daniel sat in the living room with his head in his hands, the silence of the house only broken by Sophie's soft breathing over the baby monitor. The decision to rehome Rocky was eating him alive. Memories of their life together flooded his mind, as vivid as if they had just happened. He remembered the day he had found Rocky at the shelter, a timid, scrawny pup with eyes that seemed to plead for a second chance. Daniel, grappling with the loss of his father and feeling untethered, had felt an unspoken bond with the dog. Rocky had been his anchor, a source of comfort through sleepless nights and long lonely days. Laura's voice from the kitchen pulled him back to the present. I can't trust him. Daniel, it's not personal, it's about Sophie. But it was personal for Daniel. Rocky wasn't just a dog, he was family. As much as he wanted to support Laura, he couldn't shake the feeling that her fear was unfairly clouding her judgment. Laura, meanwhile, grappled with a whirlwind of emotions sitting by Sophie's crib later that evening. She studied her daughter's tiny face, peaceful and unaware of the turmoil surrounding her. Laura's love for Sophie was all consuming, and the thought of anything or anyone putting her in harm's way was unbearable. Yet deep down, Laura also felt pangs of guilt. She had seen moments of tenderness in Rocky, like when he lay quietly by Sophie's door or nuzzled her blanket when no one was looking. Her mind wrestled with conflicting feelings. Was she doing the right thing, or was she letting her fears about Rocky's breed overshadow the truth about his nature? The tension in the Reed household didn't escape Rocky. His once playful demeanor had dimmed, replaced by quiet vigilance. He followed Laura wherever she went, his eyes scanning Sophie's every move as if he were her shadow. While Laura saw this as unsettling, Daniel recognized it as Rocky's way of protecting the baby. One evening, as Daniel sat on the floor to pack some of Rocky's toys for his upcoming departure, the dog patted over, pressing his head into Daniel's lap. You don't understand, boy, Daniel murmured, his voice cracking. I'm trying to do right by everyone. Rocky stayed there unmoving, as if he did understand. Laura, observing from the doorway, softened at the sight. She hadn't wanted this divide in their home as much as she was trying to safeguard Sophie. She couldn't ignore how the decision was tearing Daniel apart, and she realized how it was affecting Rocky. But her resolve remained firm. Every time Rocky hovered near Sophie, she saw not a protector but a potential risk. One afternoon, Sophie let out a startled cry during tummy time, and Rocky rushed over, nudging her gently with his nose. Rocky, no! Laura yelled, pulling Sophie away. The dog recoiled, confused by the reprimand. The divide between Laura and Daniel grew wider. Arguments became frequent, their love for each other strained by opposing views. Yet through it all, Rocky remained steadfast, his loyalty unshaken. He continued to sit by Sophie's crib at night, as if silently pleading his case for Laura. It was unnerving for Daniel. It was proof of Rocky's unwavering devotion. The house seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the resolution of a conflict that could either break them apart or bring them closer together. And in the quiet moments, with Sophie sleeping and Rocky watching, even Laura began to wonder if she had been wrong all along. The conflict between Laura and Daniel had settled into an uneasy stalemate, the tension thick enough to feel in every corner of the house. Laura's maternal instincts, sharpened by her growing paranoia, remained resolute. Rocky was a potential threat. Daniel, on the other hand, couldn't Reconcile rehoming a dog who had been his companion through years of hardship, and who in his eyes had done nothing wrong. The divide in their relationship was not just personal but deeply emotional. Laura's fears were rooted in every story she had ever heard about pit bulls, a breed she viewed as inherently unpredictable. Daniel, however, saw Rocky not as a breed but as an individual. This fundamental difference in perspective underpinned their arguments, each debate more heated than the last. Adding fuel to the fire was the societal bias Laura couldn't shake. Friends and neighbors had commented on Rocky with way eyes, and even strangers at the park would keep their distance. Though she hated to admit it, these perceptions weighed heavily on her. What if everyone's right, Daniel? What if we're being naive? She asked one night. Meanwhile, Rocky's behavior, far from alleviating Laura's concerns, only heightened them. He was always there by Sophie's crib, at Laura's side, alert to every sound Sophie made for Daniel. This was evidence of Rocky's loyalty and protective instincts for Laura. It was unsettling, a constant reminder of the risk she believed they were taking. But the main conflict wasn't just between Laura and Daniel, it was within Laura herself, torn between her love for animals and her overwhelming need to protect Sophie. Laura found herself questioning everything. Was she being cautious, or was she being unfair? And what if her fears were wrong? The turning point came on a cold Wednesday night. Sophie, who had been fussy all day, suddenly spiked a fever. Laura, exhausted and worried, tucked her into her crib and went to call the pediatrician. In the middle of her conversation, Rocky's frantic barking erupted from Sophie's room. Laura froze, her stomach lurching. What now? She muttered, racing up the stairs. Bursting into the nursery, she found Rocky standing on his hind legs, his paws on the crib's edge. Sophie was crying weakly, her tiny face flushed. Rocky, get down, Laura shouted, pulling Sophie into her arms. But as she held her daughter, Laura noticed something odd. Rocky wasn't barking at Sophie but toward the corner of the room. His eyes were fixed, his brows low and guttural. Puzzled and shaken, Laura brought Sophie into their room and closed the door. Daniel, she called, her voice trembling. I think Rocky might have saved her. Later that night, Daniel reviewed the camera footage. What he saw left him speechless. The video showed Sophie tossing fitfully in her crib, her breathing shallow. Rocky entered the room, sniffing the air before nuzzling her gently. When she didn't stir, he barked sharply, his behavior increasingly urgent. The growling Laura had heard a reaction to Sophie's distress, not aggression. Laura, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, you have to see this. As the footage played, Laura's face softened, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered, tears welling up. She had been so sure Rocky was a danger. Yet here he was protecting Sophie in the most selfless way imaginable. The revelation shifted the entire dynamic. For the first time, Laura began to question whether she had been wrong, not just about Rocky but about the assumptions she had made all along. The house was still that night, but the tension between Laura and Daniel felt louder than ever. The video of Rocky's actions had shaken Laura to her core, leaving her grappling with guilt and doubt. She sat by Sophie's crib, her thoughts swirling. What if her assumptions about Rocky had been wrong all along? What if, in her quest to protect Sophie, she had been misjudging their loyal dog? The next day brought an unexpected test. Sophie's fever had subsided, but she remained lethargic. Daniel suggested taking her to the pediatrician as a precaution, and Laura agreed. While they prepared to leave, Rocky's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He followed Laura everywhere, whining softly whenever Sophie was near. As Daniel strapped Sophie into her car seat, Rocky barked insistently, blocking the doorway. Daniel, what's wrong with him? Laura asked, her voice edged with worry. I don't know, Daniel admitted, kneeling to calm Rocky, but the dog was relentless, his barking growing louder, his eyes fixed on Sophie. Laura's patience snapped. This is exactly what I was afraid of. He's unpredictable. But Daniel hesitated, noticing something different in Rocky's behavior. His barks weren't aggressive, they were desperate, urgent. Laura, he said slowly, he's trying to tell us something. Reluctantly, Laura stepped aside as Daniel unbuckled Sophie. Rocky immediately sniffed her, focusing on her chest and face, then barked sharply again. Alarmed, Laura leaned closer to Sophie, who was now breathing shallowly, her skin pale. We need to go, Laura said, panic rising in her voice. They rushed Sophie to the hospital, where doctors confirmed that her fever had masked an early respiratory infection that was quickly worsening. The pediatrician assured them that bringing her in when they did likely prevented a serious emergency. It was only then, sitting in the sterile glow of the hospital waiting room, that Laura fully grasped the weight of what had happened. Rocky's instincts had been right. He hadn't been a threat, he had been Sophie's protector all along. Returning home that evening, Laura approached Rocky for the first time without hesitation. He was waiting near Sophie's empty crib, his tail thumping softly as she knelt beside him. I'm so sorry, Rocky, she murmured, her voice breaking. I've been so wrong about you. Daniel watched from the doorway, his chest tight with a emotion. For weeks he had been fighting for Rocky, but seeing Laura finally embrace him was more meaningful than anything he could have said. The family took steps to rebuild the trust that had been fractured. Laura, determined to make amends, began working with a professional trainer to better understand Rocky's behavior and ensure the household remained safe for everyone. She started to see Rocky not as a pit bull, a label burdened with stereotypes, but as a loyal, selfless guardian who had only ever wanted to protect their family. As Sophie grew older, she and Rocky became inseparable. Photos of the pair playing in the yard with Sophie's tiny arms wrapped around Rocky's neck adorned the walls of their home. Laura, once filled with fear and doubt, became a passionate advocate for educating others about pit bulls and the importance of understanding canine behavior. The Reed family even shared their story online, hoping to challenge the misconception that had caused so much strife in their own lives. Rocky taught us more about loyalty, love and trust than we ever imagined, Laura wrote in one post. We almost let fear take away one of the best things in our lives. In the end, Rocky's place in the family was undeniable. He had earned it not just through his actions but through his unwavering dedication to Sophie and the Reeds. And as they sat together one quiet evening, Laura and Daniel on the couch, Sophie asleep upstairs and Rocky at their feet, it was clear that they had finally found peace as a family. What would you have done in Laura's shoes if this story moved you? The one now on your screen is equally heartwarming.